Mark, but this flea, John Donne's poem begins. Mark, that is, pay attention, or look. Mark, it says again, before the first line's over. But this is a poem. There's nothing to actually look at, only words are here. As readers then, we are just going to have to see what isn't there. It's a small effort that readers of almost anything soon forget they have to make it. But in this case, if we go with John Donne's argument that unrolls, a lot can come from a little. Lots of things in poems rely on conventions of one kind or another. Conventions themselves tend to create expectations, and part of the pleasure of good poetry lies in the ways a poem can sometimes go with our expectations, sometimes push against them by steering around a certain convention. Donne's The Flea doesn't come from nowhere. This poem, so unconventional in many ways, relates to and relies upon conventions in order to make itself so original. There were Flea poems and Flea comparisons in poems before it was ever written. Donne knows this, and he's happy for us to know it too. It's not a problem. Everybody can grasp the basic witty comparison involved here, the conceit, to give it its old name. A flea gorges on blood, first from the male speaker, then from his admired female acquaintance. Since the flea now contains both their bloods, the speaker can argue that they have already mixed blood, a process which at the time sex was thought to constitute too. And therefore, playfully, if that's how we want to hear this, he can argue that the pair are already as good as mated. We could call this comic, and it does have a real and pronounced comic aspect in the poem. But that's not to say that Donne's poem isn't being serious about its comic business, for the comedy is already there in the conventional comparison and in the disproportion between big human beings and extremely tiny things like fleas. Do little things really mean big things if you look at them from a certain angle? Good poems have all kinds of little things in them, where bigger things are contained. A detail in a poem can swell with more than itself, like this weirdly engorged flea. Yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered swells with one blood made of two, and this, alas, is more than we would do. Enjoys without even needing to woo, without needing to ask permission. So the flea is pampered indeed. We might look at this from another angle, with an eye for detail, if you like, rather than the big picture. And what this particular eye can see is a poem where form itself is becoming somehow engorged, swelling up and over and above itself, when couplets turn into triplets. A couplet is simply the rhyming of two consecutive lines. Look at the second stanza, though each stanza is actually the same in this respect, and it's piling up of three couplets. Oh stay, 3 lives and 1 flea spare, where we almost, nay, more than married are. This flea is you and I, and this our marriage bed and marriage temple is. Though parents grudge, and you, we're met and cloistered in these living walls of jet. You can tell how effective the couplet form is for presenting an argument and moving it forward. First this, and then if this other thing follows from it. But notice on the way how Donne is rhyming this and is, not for the first but for the second time, since it's also in the rhyme of the first couplet in the whole poem. Does he think we've forgotten it so soon? No. And he may be hinting that if a thing's worth doing, it's worth doing twice. But couplets aren't the whole story, which, if the poem were nothing more and nothing less than a concerted argument, a crash course in unstoppable persuasion, it ought to be. For each stanza ends in what I'm calling a triplet, a couplet with a line and a rhyme extra, as here. Though use make you apt to kill me, let not to that self-murder added be, and sacrilege 3 sins in killing 3. If we're just listening to the poem, we hear this. Me, be, thee. We hear into the bargain another rhyme we heard before in the first stanza, thee, be. If we're reading the poem on a page, we see it also. 3 lines where 2 are expected. In its first printing, after Donne's death, the 3 lines are indented further to the right than the rest of the stanza, and so are insistent about being seen apart. Like the flea, the stanza gets bigger. Bigger with what in that extra rhyme sound each time? Now, asking this might be just fanciful, an exercise in asking too much about too little. But then there's nothing more fanciful, is there, than making a flea into not just an emblem of, but a physical proof of congress between 2 lovers that might as well go on and become sexual. So, look again at those triplet rhymes in the poem's 3 stanzas. Wo, to, do, me, be, 3, be, me, thee. And notice also that the first stanza has a thee, be rhyme, and the third, in the same position but now with the order of the rhyme words thrown into reverse, be, thee. The 2 people, male speaker and addressed girl, are facing the possibility of union into one. The flea is all for this state of affairs, so much that it mingles their blood in advance, as it were, of any actual breaching of the maidenhead, though the addressed woman, so far as we can tell, is not giving an inch. Thou deniest me, parents' grudge, and you. One argument of the poem, then, is don't listen to your parents, don't even listen to yourself. Listen to me as I explain what's going on inside the flea. Mark it. And listen not least to how thee and me are together in repeating and engorging rhymes as 2 are in fact 3, and all together intimately united thanks to the flea. The poem, we might remember, takes care to organise itself into 3 stanzas, not 1 and not 2. Flea, of course, is a perfectly good rhyme for words like be, me, and thee. But though the flea's there in the poem, it's not there as a rhyme, except, and unforgettably, as the title. One last thought about the great in the small. Is Donne teasing us with something other than the merely flirtatious and all its I'm not serious but then again I might be games of mock persuasion? For who in Donne's world could pay attention, however playfully, to arguments about 3 separate identities forming one without an echo somewhere in their minds of the 3 persons of the Holy Trinity, where the relations between and interconnected dynamics of Father, Son, and Holy Ghost had already generated centuries upon centuries of brain racking, and in Donne's own time, racking of a more literal kind? Is the poem then about this? The literal cold light of day answer is no. But it's in the end not much of an answer, for the dangerous energy of the question has something to do with the way this poem works, the thing this poem is, just as the fact that nobody's actually going to be persuaded into bed by the speaker's insistent argument doesn't make the poem itself any the less teasing, alluring, and, in the very unexpectedness of its angle, erotic. It's wrong to treat Donne's poems as though they were nothing more than riddles, tempting as that is sometimes. If they are riddles, then they tend to be riddles without answers, or to have answers that turn out to be riddles themselves. How can two people hope to make one when they are three? Puzzled? Mark but this flea. Mark but this flea, and mark in this how little that which thou deniest me is. It sucked me first, and now sucks thee, and in this flea our two bloods mingled be. Thou knowest that this cannot be said a sin, nor shame, nor loss of maidenhead, yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered swells with one blood made of two, and this, alas, is more than we would do. O stay, 3 lives in one flea spare, where we almost, nay, more than married are. This flea is you and I, and this our marriage bed and marriage temple is, though parents grudge, and you. We're met and cloistered in these living walls of jet. Though use make you apt to kill me, let not to that self-murder added be, and sacrilege, 3 sins in killing 3. Cruel and sudden, hast thou since purpled thy nail in blood of innocence? Wherein could this flea guilty be, except in that drop which it sucked from thee? Yet thou triumphst, and sayest that thou find'st not thyself, nor me the weaker now. 'Tis true. Then learn how false fears be. Just so much honour, when thou yield'st to me, will waste as this flea's death took life from thee.